Hey everyone, NWA Prepper here. Good morning. It is probably 8 o'clock Central Time when I post this anyway. So today is maybe a little bit of a gripe or a rant. Totally about shelter. So it's shelter is really important. You know, it's on the list of without it you die. So, and I want to talk about portable shelters, or whatever your shelter plan is kind of what I'm referring to. And I'm going to give an example of why I'm so upset. I was going to say pissed. I'm really angry. And not at anyone particular, just at a situation. So, if you have in your plan, let's start simple. Let's say your only plan is, or your only available options are, you need to throw a backpack on your back and take off to the woods. Okay, I've been there, I understand. You need to practice that. You need to go out after work this coming Friday or the next Friday or whatever your Friday is with that pack, and you need to go out to the woods and you need to set up your shelter system. If it's a tube tent, you need to go set it up. You need to crawl in it. You need to try to sleep in it. You need to figure out how that all works. In the daylight, figure it out, practice, enjoy the overnight, have a good time, come home the next day if you have to. But I would more challenge you to take that shelter down, to pack up your camp and move. Even if you're only moving 50 feet. Or 4 feet. Take your camp completely down, pack it totally up, put it back on your back, and then take 2 steps and set it back up again. When you get good, where you don't have to worry about how to set up your tube tent in this case, then do it in the dark. And I mean, go ahead and start with in the dark with a flashlight, but get to where you can set it up in the dark, without having to look, well, how does this go? What is this? Where does this fit? How does this fit in there? Figure out how to set up your tent. And that goes for any shelter. You need to learn how to do it. The only way to do that is to open the package, which I'm not big in keeping it in the package if you're in a bag, but irrelevant. If it's in your truck, it's in your car, it's in a tub, it's in a trunk of camping gear, if it's out in a cache site somewhere, if it's at a bug out location, wherever this tent is or shelter, say well, I'm going to build a baker shelter. Okay, do it. Go out and do it. And do it again, and do it again, and do it again, until it is second nature. You can be thinking of other things and still erect the shelter in the dark, in the cold, in the rain. I don't get excited about being out and setting up a camp in any of those conditions either, but I certainly don't shy from them. Matter of fact, the older I get, the more likely I am to go camping if I think weather might be a little iffy. Your shelter is important. An example that is irking me is this group goes camping with us. Another small group, and they go out there and they have some badass high-speed gear. Okay. And they look high speed. Great. We're not on a tactical drill. We are just on a camp trip, on a practice for mass feeding. Actually, was the principle of it. And so we get out there, and as soon as we get there and we decide this is the spot, this is where we're going to set up, in my mind and in my actions, okay, this is set up, I need some form of immediate shelter. Bam. And the first thing I do is I throw up a tarp. Or in this case, I had a trailer. I threw up a pop-up canopy that I had gotten at a yard sale. I threw up the canopy and I put the rest of my stuff under that, ready to go, ready to set up. And then I started on my tent, on my shelter. And I've got a pretty wicked cool shelter. I got an Alaska Geodome super all-weather awesome tent that I'm very, very proud of. I've had it for a long time and take good care of it. It was a high dollar item to me. So some of you it may not be, but to me it was. That's not the shelter I'm setting up. But it didn't matter. I set my shelter up right away. We had already had things covered, like we had security out. I mean, we had other things. My duties were nest, set up my area. And so that's what me and my family were doing. We set up our shelter, made sure everything was good and set for inclement weather. Even though we had an iPhone that said it wasn't coming, we still prepared it like it would. So in the event that it does, flaps are ready to be dropped and ropes are tightened and, stakes are in the ground and things like that. You need to do that. You need to set up your shelters. You need to get out and get things done. Right? Well, there's lots of other things that I want to do when I get to a campsite versus setting up my shelter. Lots of things. Not gonna lie, lots and lots of things. I can set my shelter up in the dark, whether it's out of the package or in the package. I can feel my way and see my way and visualize it and put that bad boy up in just a few minutes. And it doesn't really matter any of my current shelter systems. It just takes a couple moments and I'm all set up. Once I'm done with that, then I have a place to stow any equipment, to put anyone who's sick or injured, to deal with containing and securing people and things. And then I can move on to the next step, sanitation. Again, security's taken care of. Well, these guys couldn't do any of that. Their tent was brand new in a bag. It was a $9 or $10 kids tent. They got, because it was super light, well, it's super inefficient. It's not big enough for them and their gear, much less the two people that they were trying to put in it. They'd never set it up. They didn't know how to do it. They ended up, no kidding, just saying, oh, we'll just lean on a tree. Great, lean on a tree. Well, guess what? It dude really, really heavy. Like pour water on things heavy. So all their equipment, their boots and their packs and everything was heavily, heavily damp, like wet the next morning, including them. So they start the day off cold. Their sleeping bags were inadequate. They decided to just use a whoopee, two of which didn't even know what a whoopee was. You need to practice. You need to practice, and it's not so that you make Travis cranky. It's so that it's set up properly, and it does the job it's intended. And if you practice and you learn that this particular item doesn't do the job that's intended, okay, doesn't matter. That was a dry run of practice. We can make whatever changes we need. You need your shelter system to work, whatever it is. Some of the best shelters I've ever made were with a $10 tarp and some paracord. My preferred shelter is some paracord and a tarp and a hammock, which all that you can get really inexpensive nowadays. But you got to practice. You need to do it where it's second nature, where you know how everything works. And so if there's going to be a failure, dome tents, notoriously the shock cord in the middle of the bungee breaks, becomes untied. You don't need those shock cords to put up that tent. How do I know that? Because it's failed and I've practiced and I've learned how to overcome that. I am not a super woodsman, but I spend a lot of time in the woods. Practice your shelter. It's your home. It's your security. It's your safety. It's your whoopee, your blanket, your Linus's blanket. Particularly if you have family and kids. They need that shelter. They need that cave. They need that this is our home spot thing. So do you. If you say you don't, you're a liar. Be smart. Practice your shelters. Learn to do it correctly. Learn to do it a lot. Make it where it's second nature. Where you get somewhere when it's time to set up a shelter, you just do it. So when there's issues such as darkness or a missing part or a broken part or there's not a place to set it up right, you can either focus on that problem or you've already thought of a solution because it's happened. I want you to be safe. I want you to be secure. And I want you to have what you need to survive. Skills are where it's at. Practice your shelters. It's part of being ready. Whether you're bugging out or not. If you're not bugging out, if you're bugging in, great. You may need to put up an OPLP. There's a lot of things. If you own a tent or if you own a shelter system, you need to practice it. Thanks for watching. Let's get ready.